Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Lee of IMMI. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kevin.
Thanks so much for having me, Cameron.
Of course. So I'd like to start out with your upbringing. So where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, I was actually born in Northern California, in a place called San Jose. My parents immigrated here from Taiwan. And so something that Taiwanese immigrants typically do at a very young age when you're born is they leave you with your grandparents in Taiwan as they try to make their way in America and, build a life here with their, lack of financial and social capital. And so a lot of my childhood I did spend with my grandparents in their produce farms out in Taiwan. So our grandparents grow something called a rose apple, which is just like a porous fruit native to the Southeast Asian regions,
Mhm.
and had many a fun childhood times just kind of running through the fields, picking, stemming, packaging fruit, helping
Yeah,
my grandparents with that.
definitely. With that, would you see an entrepreneurial mindset? Of course, you were working in the field with them with the fruits. Were you doing any of the internal work as well?
No, so that was actually not something I had much exposure to, apart
Okay.
from we'd just go sell it to the market, but I
Yeah.
didn't deal with any of the administrative stuff. I would say it was a pretty rural farm, nothing crazy sophisticated.
Yeah.
So didn't get to learn the mechanics of the food industry that well.
Definitely. So growing up, how long were you overseas and when eventually did you come to the States? Did you study over there as well?
No, so I actually was I studied America in California, and San Jose was where I went to primary school up until, and then high school we moved a little bit north, this place called Fremont,
Okay.
and then I ended up doing university in Berkeley. So I
Got
basically
it.
stayed in Northern California my whole life.
Got it. With your time at UC Berkeley, what did you study there?
I was a business administration major, and then I did I guess you call it a minor in, it was industrial engineering. Um,
Okay.
at the time, it was a certificate that we had, and so it was a good opportunity for me to learn um, linear optimization, like how you take these qualitative problems, turn them into like quantitative problems, identify bottlenecks.
Mm.
So it was a very ops focused type
Yeah.
of function, not true engineering by any regard, but I think it really spurred a love of understanding systems and like
Definitely.
productivity, things that we try to bring into our company today.
Definitely. With your time there, were you involved with any athletics or clubs?
Not necessarily athletics. I did do a few business organizations, um, but and also like case. We did these like
Mm.
case presentations where you would compete.
Yeah.
So I did, represent our school and go international and do some of these, and that was also a fun experience.
Definitely. Following your time at UC Berkeley and prior to IMMI, what kind of jobs were you working?
Yeah, so I actually spent most of my time in finance in the early days.
Mhm.
In school, when I was studying business administration, I started teaching personal finance to high school students in the area. I taught basically like a stocks class. It was an accredited class at Berkeley for about 2 years,
Okay.
and so that was a really fun process. I really enjoyed teaching, and it got me. I was always interested in like investing and
Definitely.
started. So post college, I basically, my first role was in a banking job out in Palo Alto, their tech banking group. I only lasted 8 months. So
Okay.
shortly after I moved into tech, and we can talk about that in a second, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really fascinated. I was looking at some of your work with something you started called Project Manager HQ. I'm curious in how this venture started, kind of mainly around educating in the project manager space and this community built. How did this kind of start?
Yeah. So first thing is it's product manager HQ
Product.
versus,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, my
No,
bad.
it's no, not at all. It's a funny thing. A lot of people actually will sometimes mix project and product, and there's
Definitely.
definitely some distinctions. I think when my second job out of after I left banking, when I was in product management, and I was
Got it.
actually new to the industry. A roommate I had been living with used to be an associate product manager at Google, and I used to come home every day super late. He'd be chilling on the couch working on some presentation, and I just ask him, hey, what do you do? And it just got me really interested in that role. And so at the time, at the bank I was working at, all the social media sites were blocked except for Quora,
Mm.
the Q&A platform. And
Yeah.
on there was a product management category where I would just kind of read questions and answers, learn some more about the space. And I tried to, when I was studying for interviews, I basically realized that there wasn't like a central website or resource for learning about product management. It was all
Mm.
disparate, like individuals' blogs,
Yeah.
or it was, like random forums. So uh, I just thought, hey, well, there really should be a central resource. And so Product Manager HQ started out as a blog. It was literally me just writing articles about like how to interview for the role.
Mm.
And then once I switched into the industry, a lot of my friends or even strangers would ping me and be like, hey, curious how you broke in without, a tech background. And then at a certain point, I just ran out of time to do the copies. So I just
Yeah.
started sending them these articles. And that's how the initial traffic to the site grew. And from there, it kind of expanded into, one of the top read newsletters in the industry.
Wow.
We built the world's first and largest product management community.
Wow.
And then now there's a bunch of courses, certifications. I can't take credit for like, some of the recent things that have happened because about a year or two ago, I brought on 2 business partners who basically have just grown it, and I've become more of a silent partner. But that
Yeah.
was a very fun experience, kind of bootstrapping something from the ground up, just
Definitely.
purely SEO and community building.
Definitely. Yeah. With that community building, I'm curious, what platform were you mainly using to converse between those who would join the community as well?
Yeah, I think anyone looking to build a community, a lot of people dwell on like the platforms or the product or the apps that you use, and I think that's
Yeah.
actually what's more important is to understand, okay, well, what are the work streams that your community already lives in?
Mm.
And like, you don't want people to deviate too much from what like is already in their natural flow. So at
Yeah.
the time, product managers, we were all accustomed to working in Slack because that's where, our eng design, basically the entire product team works in Slack.
Yeah.
And so, it'd be weird if you as a product manager had to like tab into a Facebook group in the middle of the day to like
Definitely.
participate in a community. It just makes you look like you're not working. And so
Yeah.
I figured, hey, run this. This was back in the day when Slack was just starting out as a company. I had heard about it because some of our engineers were like starting to use it.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh, well, we might as well just start this community within Slack. Now there's thousands of them, but
Definitely.
back in 2012, 2013, it was still relatively new.
Definitely. With that platform, was there any monetization at all, or was this straightly just community building and
Yeah,
relationships?
actually, that's a great question. I would say the first 1,000 members was entirely free. It was
Yeah.
honestly an experiment.
Definitely.
At the time, it was just like, hey, let's see if we can get, and it started out with like 50 of my friends who then invited other friends. And then it just started growing from there.
Yeah.
Around the 1,000 member mark, what happened was we started getting spammed. Basically, like people would join the community, spam their product or whatever like app they were working on.
Yeah.
And then like, just like immediately bounce. And so we started instituting a $25 lifetime fee. That has never changed. That's been like that since the beginning. And
Yeah.
it completely changed the quality of participants where
I'm
once you
sure.
have some skin in the game, you're just like, okay, now I got to participate. I can't like randomly spam people. So
Definitely.
surprisingly has done wonders. Yeah.
Definitely. So I'm fascinated. In 2019, this is where IMMI comes. And with such a history in banking, investing, how did you enter the food and beverage industry? And what made you fascinated with entering that? And what void did you notice?
Yeah, the food industry, it's funny. I don't think I would have expected 5, ish years ago, or even the decade that I've been working in the tech industry. I never thought I'd end up working in the food industry.
Yeah.
People say like, well, okay, your grandparents were in the food industry, but working on a farm is completely different from running a CPG company. And so we didn't
Yeah.
have any prior experience. But my co-founder, his name is also Kevin. So we append our last names. I call him K Chan. He calls me K Lee. Both of us met again like 10 years ago at that first tech company. It was a mobile gaming company called Kaban. We were both product managers, and we became close friends. We were roommates. He lives like 10 minutes away from me in SF now. Both of us actually like his grandparents were also in the food industry, and in fact, his dad used to run a Thai restaurant in LA selling noodles as well. And
Okay.
so both of us, a few years ago, we're early 30s now, but like few years ago, we noticed that in our families, there were just very high rates of chronic health conditions. So
Mm.
like pre-diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity. And it kind of just got us thinking like, well, we both can't, we have these like family origins in the food business. We both are paying so much attention to health and wellness now because of our own families.
Mhm.
Is there an opportunity to build a better for you food and beverage brand, but not just like another, protein bar brand with like American flavors, like strawberry, or like we grew up in these Asian food families. And, we know the Asian food industry, we know these Asian flavors and cuisines. Why don't we do what we know best, which is like create something in our culture that is better for you?
Yeah.
And it also fit what was going on with the macro trends in the food industry. K-Chan, before IMMI, he was a lead product manager at Facebook, where he was starting to see, even just like anecdotally across all the ad platforms, like, yeah, food, like the CPG industry for food and beverage was just growing. Like people were obviously willing to shop for food products online.
Yeah,
So it doesn't, it's like kind of a no-brainer now, but like, if
definitely.
you think back a few years ago, it's still a relatively new concept, especially pre-COVID. For myself, when I was at my previous venture firm, Pear Ventures, our second fund started investing in better for you food and beverage, and then I ended up leading that, their food and beverage investing practice. And I was seeing that, when we were speaking with like buyers at these groceries, they were saying, look, Asian flavors are like the number one most requested flavor right now. A
Wow.
lot of that probably comes from what's been going on in the media. Obviously, you have things like Squid Games or like the new, the Marvel movie Shang-Chi, like Crazy Rich
Yeah.
Asians. More awareness in media obviously is going to lead to like more awareness around the food.
Yeah.
And so Asian cuisine was the number one fastest growing cuisine in America. And so all these things kind of culminated where we were like, okay, we gotta like, let's see if we can build a better for you, like Asian American food brand. And instant ramen was not too far off of like a concept for us because we grew up eating that stuff. I'm sure if you
Yeah.
ask any stranger on the street, they've probably had it at some point in their lives.
Of course.
It's like a $46 billion industry that no one pays attention to,
Wow.
because it's the same three conglomerates who basically sell the exact same formulation they've sold for the past 60 years. They
Yeah.
don't need to change it because it's still just as popular. People love the taste, but
Yeah.
it's just kind of a category ripe for like innovation.
Definitely.
So that's what we basically spent the past 2 years doing is we went heads down on R&D. And I'm probably jumping the gun here, but
No, no
that's
worries.
kind of the genesis around IMMI. Yeah.
Definitely. Mentioning that you didn't really have much prior experience, what did the prototyping process look like for you and your co-founder to discover what was the right formulation of ingredients?
Yeah, we don't, neither of us have food science or chef backgrounds. We are,
Yeah.
of course, very interested in the food industry, but both of us did what anyone else would do when they're trying to learn something for the first time, which is we went straight to YouTube. Like
Yeah.
we quite literally typed in like how to make instant ramen,
Yeah.
and we just watched like videos of factories and like all these like home chefs trying to make it from scratch, and we just copied their steps in the beginning. Like we were like, look, we don't even know how to make like a proper ramen noodle. Like let's just copy someone and make sure we know how to make like the basis of it. From
Yeah.
there, we started to buy like every type of ingredient we could find on Amazon. We read research papers. Like my co-founder would find these Chinese and Japanese noodle research papers, and we would translate them using Google Translate.
Wow.
And then like, or with my limited Chinese, and then we would just like piece it together, try to follow the instructions, and then make variations of different noodles. So the first 200 iterations we made in our own kitchens, and a lot of people
Wow.
don't believe us, but we have like, I documented all the photos. Like I took photos of every single variation because we love to build in public. It's like really important to us. And
Definitely.
that was just like a very fun journey. We have a lot of good memories just like messing around in our kitchens to get to that point.
Definitely. Um, with a better for you ramen, especially, and I'm sure a lot of those YouTube videos were traditional ramen, instant ramen. How did you discover to differ that and still maintain a flavor that was satisfactory?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think, it's in, I think that one thing in the food industry that obviously differs a lot from the tech industry is like this concept of like leverage and how, you can use an elegant piece of code to like make something, make like a piece of software like 10 times, 100 times more efficient. In
Yeah,
food, you are limited by food physics. Like,
definitely.
if you add protein here, that means that texturally it may deteriorate here. Like
Mm,
it's generally like it can be a zero sum game in that regard.
yeah,
And so I think for us, we did definitely within like, I think at like iteration 100, we hit this like basically this local maximum in our food science like knowledge, whatever limited knowledge there was there. And we actually did have to go find like a food science PhD and a chef advisors. And it's not like they came and they were like, oh, here's how you make the like actually food scientists are kind of like developers in the tech industry. Like they each specialize in one thing or like maybe a small handful of things,
Yeah.
but no one is really like the noodle specialist food scientist who's going to solve your problem. So
Yeah.
really what they did was they actually just gave us like tools, additional tools in our toolkit, aka the chef was like, hey, you have tried these like 20 proteins, but did you know that there's like 5 other proteins that are pretty novel in the market that like there's no way we would have known about unless we worked in the industry.
Yeah.
And then the food science PhD was like, hey, you guys are making like 2 formulations per hour because you have to like mix the dough, roll it out, let it rest for like 30 minutes, and then like sheet it, cut it. He's like, did you know that if you did like these simple tweaks, you could produce like 10 formulations an hour? And so when you have a broader range of ingredients and a broader range of like processes to speed up your throughput, you can imagine that allows you to create like many more iterations at a much faster pace.
Yeah.
And that allows you to then get to just basically different formulations much faster. And it just sped us up so much more. And
Definitely.
I don't think I answered your original question, but it was more so like when you're allowed to like fail multiple times, but faster, your velocity increases and you're just going to get to your solution much faster. So
of course,
maybe we could have brute forced this if it took us like 4 years, but luckily we were able to shorten that to like 1.5 years. And so,
Definitely. So at the start of that prototyping and all the different iterations, how long would you say from prototype to launch? How long was that period there?
God, it was a long time. So we worked nights and weekends for about 8 months just to get to what we thought was an acceptable formula. And this is my advice for like any food founder out there is like everything you make in your kitchen likely is not going to be replicable like in a manufacturing setting. So rather than do things sequentially where you like create a formula, then approach a manufacturer, it's like you should just do these in parallel. Like you got to find a manufacturer, even if you're worried like why would they take me on if I don't have a base formulation? If you can sell them on your vision and your dream, like most co-manufacturers have like an R&D team that's going to work with you to help like adjust your formula and get it to something that works in their machines.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, because we did things sequentially and we made that mistake, it took us basically like after those 8 months, we went full time. It took us like another year just to get, the first version of IMMI out in the market. And the first version was not great. When we say not great, it means it did not appeal to a mainstream audience. When we did our testing of the product within our private community, we knew that if you were low carb, keto, or like otherwise carb restricted, like a diabetic, you still liked the product because you literally had no other options. And so like this was better than nothing. But we knew that to get to like a mainstream adoption would require a lot more work. And part of that was also because COVID happened. So we originally wanted to like go international for manufacturing. The borders got shut down. So we had to find this like local manufacturer that had 0 experience in instant ramen. And we had to like figure out how to make it. And that's what created like a subpar product in the beginning. But, then from there, it took us another 8 months of like redoing the formula, setting up a new supply chain with a new manufacturer. And that's the version we have now in the market that we launched a few months ago. And that's the one that's had like rave reviews from like chefs, influencers, celebrities, like your everyday person in middle America. But long story short is it took us about like, another 1.5 to 2 years, it felt like, just to get like a good product in the market.
Definitely. What would you say was your main marketing strategy then? Getting that new product, especially with the second version, with the version that you're excited about and customers are raving about. What was the marketing strategy there?
So I'd say a big piece of this was just this idea of like building in public. I think it's a scary thing for some founders who it's just like not a natural way of how they do things. Like, a lot of my friends, they're like introverts or, it's not in their DNA to be like, hey, I spent like a full day doing research. I'm going to now go like tweet about it, or like I'm going to go post in our private Facebook community about like with a photo of what I did today. To some, it feels like a little showboaty. But I think there's ways you can do that elegantly where it's just like, look, people want to be involved in the process, right? They want to know what's going on behind the scenes. It's not rocket science, but in our private community, we literally posted like photos or videos of us like driving to like a mixer where we blended a bunch of ingredients together. It's not super like sexy or anything, but
Yeah,
it's fun for someone who's like, following your journey, and they get to see from like conception all the way to like product and market.
definitely.
So our private community grew from 0 to 4,200 people like organically, and it was just people who were interested in following our process, and a lot of them ended up becoming our evangelists when we launched.
Mm,
Like, a fun story we always say is, when we first launched, we had some Facebook ads, and there were in every Facebook ad, there's always trolls, like people who just
definitely.
like are gonna come on troll immediately. And we would see our Facebook community members come on and basically like pile in and like defend us like on our behalf, and
Wow.
be like, they'll be like, I've known the Kevins for a year. Like, they don't really know us, but they kind of like, they would followed us in
Yeah.
the in the community, and they were like, there's no way that they would like do this, or like they have like all their customers' best interests at heart. And it was just like really fun to see these people come defend you, because you've been building in public, you've built a relationship with them over time. I
Mm,
think that's the power of having that community.
definitely.
Um, so we did a lot of that. I think the other thing was, we spent a lot of time building our email list in conjunction with R&D.
Mm,
This is the other thing I think it's really important to do, is just like, everyone's going to hole up for a period of time. If you're doing anything that requires product innovation, doesn't matter if you're in CPG or not, like it requires deep work. But
yeah,
simultaneously, you should be building demand, right? And it's like, those things don't have to come at a cost of one another. Like, usually there's going to be downtime when you're doing R&D.
for
You
sure.
can use that time to then like do the things we talked about, like posting in a private community, going on subreddits, like replying to people, driving them to a landing page to sign up for an email list. So we had an email wait list around like 35,000 people by the time we launched, because we took the time to do the building in public,
Mm,
to aggregate demand while we were doing the R&D.
amazing. With that feedback from marketing, what would you say is the main demographic then for IMMI?
So it used to be the case that when we first launched, it was like that low carb, like keto, carb restricted audience. And it also skewed like 70-30 of female versus male.
Okay.
I would say the age demographic was also, probably in like the 35 to 65 range. And these were customers uh, across like probably all of America. I would say now it's probably shifted where it's more so like 50-50 male, female. It's expanded, the age range has expanded to 25 plus.
Okay.
So there's definitely like, a younger audience that's now eating the product. Um, I would say the core audience generally is still probably like health minded.
Yeah.
But we've seen that anyone really who's had ramen at some point in their life, but like stopped eating it, is now coming back. That's actually literally the phrases we see in all of our reviews, is like, I used to eat ramen, but I stopped as an adult, or like stopped when I realized how terrible it was. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, IMMI, for bringing ramen back to my life.
Wow.
And that audience can be anyone, anywhere. And that's actually like one of the reasons why we love ramen, is because I don't think we've met a single person where we've brought up instant ramen or ramen, they've been like, no, I hate that. Like, almost everyone loves the idea of ramen.
Yeah.
Because they've either had it or they've just like tried a ramen restaurant.
Yeah.
That's kind of the nice thing about this category.
For sure. From the customer's POV, then, does IMMI does it does it correlate with traditional ramen, instant ramen, where it's water in a bowl, microwave, etc., or how does that look preparing?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely microwavable. You can boil it on a stovetop. It
Okay.
takes 7 minutes, which is definitely longer than traditional instant ramen.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for that is because we have 21 to 22 grams of protein
Yeah.
in the noodle itself. It's also like 18 to 19 grams of fiber, and it's only 5 to 6 grams of net carbs.
Mm,
So most people don't know what any of that means in the context of like, if you don't study macronutritional information. So effectively, we just say it's like 3 to 4 times the amount of protein. It's like 4 to like 8 times the amount of fiber. And it's basically like 85% less in carbs than your like traditional instant ramen. So
definitely.
those tend to put things in perspective. But yeah, it definitely takes a little bit longer to prepare. And we think that trade-off is worth it for the
For
health.
sure. Looking at IMMI today, what would you say is the top seller flavor-wise?
Yeah, so when we first created our flavors, 2 of the flavors were like very near and dear to our hearts. Spicy beef is actually based off like my Taiwanese heritage. In Taiwan, like spicy beef noodle soup is like this kind of, it's almost like I don't want to call it like the country dish, but it's definitely
Yeah.
like a dish that's very well known. And then in Thailand, tom yum is obviously very like, it's a popular dish. And so K-Chan really wanted that tom yum shrimp. We did do a lot of demand testing around these flavors as well, just to know that like, hey, these are the right flavors. But
Hmm.
those 2 were kind of like non-negotiables for us. The
Yeah.
third one, black garlic chicken, it's an homage to like Japanese traditional flavors. of ramen. And that one, I don't know if it's the branding. I don't know if it's because it's chicken, which is one of the most popular, but that one, of course, is our best seller.
Okay.
It is a delicious flavor. I think Kate and I just happen to be loyal to the ones that we created from our heritage.
Definitely. So I like to conclude each episode with this. If you could share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, something you've learned or regret, what would that be?
Something I learned or regret. Um, yeah, I think for me, and maybe this won't resonate with everyone, but um, I used to have a lot of anxiety about running a startup, and the anxiety comes from the fact that as human beings, uh, we want to know what the outcome of something is going to be, right? That level of
Yeah.
security gives us that comfort. And startups are uncertainty generating machines. You will never really know the outcome of something. Every milestone you unlock kind of just unlocks more problems. And if you don't take control of that anxiety, it will control you.
Mm.
And so, I liken it to, like, if you ever played a computer, like there's some computer games where when you start out, there's something called fog of war. Like you're literally like, you're this one character, you can't see the rest of the map. It's all blacked out, and that's like the fog of war. And
Yeah.
then every step you take in one direction, like the clouds kind of disappear and you can see more. And the fog of war disappears, but only in the area surrounding you. And you really just have to trust that with every step, you're going to be able to solve the problem that appears underneath that fog of war. If you trust that you can address and solve every problem that comes with each step, you don't need to feel that anxiety that, like, you don't have to have the entire map cleared where all the fog of war is gone. In
Mm.
fact, that would be kind of boring.
Yeah.
That removes the whole excitement of like running a startup and that uncertainty. So that for me was like one of the biggest pieces of advice that a coach that I worked with gave to me, and it just relieved instantly all this like tension and anxiety that I felt on a daily basis. It
Mm.
was kind of like just trusting ourselves as founders.
Definitely. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out IMMI at immieats.com.
Thanks so much, Cameron.